Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. I'm here today with Vincent Magano, and we're going to talk about his growing up in Brooklyn in I guess, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and his great book about Brooklyn, The Third Attic. So, welcome, Vincent. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Bob. These were the Uberalls, okay? Solomon and Esther. This is their picture, Bob. Can you see it? Am I doing that right?
Yeah, I can see it.
Solomon and Esther Uberall. When St. Lucy's was being built, okay, the Italians still wanted a place to go to church. So they rented or bought a nearby storefront so that they could have mass on Sunday there. Okay, a priest was assigned to the parish, but he had a place to live, but there was no church, so they had mass in this storefront. They had to buy it, okay, and they put down a small amount of money because they were spending their money on the church, and they got a huge mortgage for them at the time, huge, to be paid in 1913. Now this is 1904. They presumed by 1913 the place would be built. You know, we could sell the building and then satisfy the mortgage. By 1913, they hadn't got the marble from Italy yet for the main altar, so the church couldn't be built. The mortgage was due, and a Father Caruana from Malta was assigned as the pastor. He had to pay the mortgage, or they would lose the storefront. Just to make it quick, he went for a walk in the neighborhood trying to raise money. He couldn't. He went into the Uberall store. Now the Uberalls, Esther and Solomon, were a newly married couple, and they had a notion store on Myrtle Avenue, Bob, Myrtle and between Kent and Franklin. And again, this is 1913, and he went in, and Solomon said to Father George, "Father, why are you so sad?" And he explained to him he needed the money. He needed $500, which to them was a lot of money at the time, Bob. He said, or we're going to lose the place where we say mass on Sunday. Solomon says, "I'll take care of it, Father." Father George just says, okay, assuming that that Solomon was just being nice. Esther said to him, "Where are we going to get the money?" But they did. Solomon went from family member to family member, and he hocked their wedding gifts. He got the $500. He lent it to Father George. He paid off the mortgage, and every Monday morning after Sunday collection, Father George would go and pay off part of that $500 debt to Solomon and Esther. Now, St. Lucy's was built in 1914. Father George was transferred to St. Leo up in Corona. I think you know Corona, Bob.
Yeah, yes, okay. That's where we're from, yeah.
Yeah, I heard that on one of your podcasts. And Solomon and Esther stayed at the store. Okay. Now, Solomon unfortunately died in around 1920, right at the end of World War I. He had a heart attack as a young man and died. Esther continued with the store, the auction store. Her family helped her. Her children got older. But she and Father Caruana, of course, never saw each other again. In 1939 and 1940, in that era, Esther was getting many letters from Solomon's family in Austria. Solomon was from Austria, she was from Russia, and pleading with her to try to get them into America, because there was this madman talking about gas chambers and things, so they had to get out of Austria. She didn't know what to do. She tried, but all the codes were filled. She goes to Washington, D.C. She was very determined to get her family here, his family here. And she got no place. As she was about to leave, somebody told her, if you could get your family into Cuba, okay, Cuba will take refugees, but you need someone there who can provide for them, house them, clothe them, feed them, because they cannot be wards of the state. Cuba will not allow that. So she was elated for a while. She gets on the train to come back to Brooklyn and realizes she doesn't know anybody in Cuba. She went directly to St. Lucy's Church then, and she spoke to Father Deliberty. He was the new pastor. Now this is 1940-ish. He said, "I'll write a letter to the papal nuncio down in Cuba. I'll cable him and I'll let you know." A few days later, he says to her, "Get on the plane and go down. They're ready to meet with you." She gets on a plane, goes down to Cuba. As she gets off the plane, Bob, she sees an altar boy dressed in his altar attire approaching her with a bouquet of flowers. And she's a little puzzled. So quizzically, she looks up and she sees an ecclesiastically robed, man dressed in red with his arms stretched out. And he says, "Esther Ueberall, don't you remember me?" And it was Father Caruana. She broke down into tears. Well, this is Father Caruana. He is now an archbishop. Okay, he's an archbishop, and he is the papal nuncio in Cuba, with a direct link, obviously, to Rome. But even better than that, as the papal nuncio, he was working for the Secretary of State, who happened to be Eugenio Pacelli, who in 1939 became Pope Pius XII. So he had a direct link right to the Pope. And they were able to get 24 of Solomon's relatives out of Austria into Cuba. And Father Caruana provided for them, housed them. He gave them kosher food. And Esther was elated. In 1951, 52, as I recall, he became very ill and came back to America. And he died here, and she went to visit him, I think down in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, someplace like that. I think it was Philadelphia, in a hospital there. And he gave her a relic of St. Francis de Sales. And she wrote an article on that. And in my neighborhood, Bob, in that area where I come from, about 3 or 4 square miles, everybody knew of the Uberall story. Everybody. We were raised on this story. That's how important it was to our grandparents, that the Uberalls were so kind to them. And I don't know whether you remember the book. In the ceiling of the church, they have these grates. These again, what you see there are the skylights in the ceiling, which is the floor of the second attic. Remember that we had a first attic, a second attic, and we were searching for the third attic. That's the story. In the middle, you'll see these grates. Okay, these are air grates. If you could look very, very closely, I didn't realize this when I was a kid, but I just did now that I was writing the book. In the middle of the grate, they put the Star of David as a commemoration to the Uberalls for their kindness. The Italians never forgot that. And I just see that as such a kind thing that they did. We really need more of that today, as you know, Bob. That was really a wonderful thing that the Uberalls did.
Well, yeah, and the incredible part of the whole story is that 25 years later,
World War II, right?
Yes, I'm a true believer in it. There aren't coincidences like that. There's some kind of force